Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, January 28th, 2019. This is kind of a different show tonight. A lot of people asking what is Grand Solar Minimum, what's happening, what's going on. I think tonight we wanted to kind of clear some things up because there is a lot of disinformation out there. And there is one in particular video that we'd like to go over and discuss. The person that produced this video is telling his viewers the next time someone tells you that the GSM is here and affecting our climate, you go tell them that's a bunch of nonsense and give them a link to this video. So this man is stating that his information is in fact the truth and what's exactly going on. But we'll get more into that. I'm kind of excited tonight. Take a look at our space weather. First of all, solar wind speed sitting at 344.3 kilometers per second, 2.4 density, AR 2733. By the way, it's important to talk about AR 2733. Sunspot number 22. So far in 2019, 50% of 2019 was spotless. So already a high rate of spotless days in 2019. Also, want to point this out as well. The solar flare we talked about that came from AR 2733. This was a class. This was a C5 class, the strongest flare since February of 2018. AR 2733 is a member of decaying solar cycle 24. Perhaps the explosion was the last gap of the old solar cycle, since the sunspot is has quieted and is now turning away from Earth. And by the way, folks, while I got you here, this current sunspot is being claimed too big. The video that I'm going to go over with you guys, this little sunspot right here, it peaked at 26, sunspot number 26. It is now down to sunspot number 22. It started as sunspot number 11. But right now, this is what we're concentrating on. This sunspot here. Okay? I want you to remember this, the size of these, and the grouping here. Because this sunspot is being claimed by some people out there that this is thwarting any efforts of a grand solar minimum. And I'll go a little more detail here in a minute. Let's take a look at our SDO in motion, though, real fast. Right now, we are looking at the sun. There is that big coronal hole that is going to be Earth-facing here soon. And it's supposed to give us a little bit of increased solar wind speeds for the dates of the 30th and the 31st of January. Meanwhile, we look at our star, and there's AR 2733 that is turning away from Earth. And by the way, that C5 class solar flare, it wasn't actually to a point, I don't think, where it's going to be affecting Earth's magnetic field, as it was starting to turn away from Earth when this thing erupted. So I'm not convinced that we're going to really get any effects from that eruption at this point. Taking a look at our TSI. Now, I want to note this as well. Right now we're sitting at, as of January 20th, we have a TSI reading of 1360.63. And then we had a reading on the 19th of January, the 18th of 1360.598. And then another reading here on January, I believe that is the 16th, of a reading of 1360.57. Now, I'm only mentioning this because it's been a while since I've seen us reach the 1360.5 range more than once within a 24 to 48 hour span, and that's what we were getting here on the data. Now, TSI has continued to decline. We've seen values as high. Our peak area for TSI was 1360.7334 back in December 29th, and it looks like it reached close to that level right around the beginning of December. So kind of neat to point out that we've reached a peak twice in December, and we've reached a record, or not record, but a low in January twice as well. So will there be a third one? There wasn't a second, or there wasn't a third peak for the month of December. we'll have to watch and see if we have a third peak as far as low TSI. But very important to point out, guys, at the bottom of this TSI scale, and I know it's hard to read, but this shows the overall history of TSI, and it goes all the way back to 2003 on this graph, all right? So you see where it's kind of fluctuating up and down, and it goes back up around 2012, beginning of a maximum. Here we are at a peak of a maximum, all right? We had a little bit of a jolt in 2016, or I'm sorry, that was 2015, and then as we started heading into 16, we start to see this line gradually sink away from the peak that we had from 15 and 16. So again, another indication that our sun is heading into solar minimum. Grand solar minimum, now that's a different topic. And this is where I want to kind of get into this video now. There's a lot of channels that believe that we're in a grand solar minimum right now this second. And there's also a lot of people who believe that we could be seeing grand solar minimum in the 2030s instead. That cycle 25 will be the remaining cycle before we hit the actual grand solar minimum. And then there is also belief that we could see it in the 2040s or as high as the 2090s. Now, I don't really think that we're going to be looking at the 2090s. The 2040s wouldn't surprise me because I originally thought that we were going into the grand solar minimum in solar cycle 25. Obviously, now that I understand, that's not possible. But to hear 2030s, 2040s when the grand solar minimum starts, with the evidence that I've been presented with and from what I've been explained, I say that's more likely. And Mari and I, we've kind of made that clear a few months ago as well. Ben from Suspicious Observers also pointed that out, that solar minimum and grand solar minimum, this is where we are. And I believe he also favors another cycle before we see the actual grand solar minimum. So what does this all mean? Why are we on the air reporting this? If we're not in a grand solar minimum right now, why does this channel exist? And the main reason is because I want people to become aware with phenomena like this, with weather events like this, with temperature swings like this, TSI and other space weather factors that happen during solar minimum. I mean, since solar cycle 24 was one of the deepest minimums, this is going to be noticeable. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video that I wanted to bring everyone's attention tonight. Dr. Keith Strong. Now, I don't know how official this guy is. I've been told he has an education background in solar physics, I think. I'm not sure. I'll have to do some background on him. But he's popped up a few times on YouTube, and I've just kind of ignored his other presentations. But this one here really takes the cake because it shows you that channels like this, people like this, don't pay attention to what we're saying over here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel, and they're lumping all these Grand Solar Minimum channels into one big group, and that's not true either. Okay? So let's take a listen here to what Mr. Strong has to say. By the way, guys, take a look at the likes and dislikes. 55 likes, 58 dislikes. So to me, another proof that we are starting to get the message out there that people are believing the science of GSM theory, and the correlations that we see are true compared to what we're being fed from the AGW. And this guy here, he's also done a piece about Miss Zarkova, and pretty disrespectful from what I've been told. I haven't watched the piece. I will dive into that. We possibly might be doing another show to help breaking that one down as well. But let's go ahead and let's listen to the jolly old chap here in the UK.
Welcome. I'm afraid I have some very bad news for the Grand Solar Minimum.
Uh-oh.
Solar Cycle 24 is alive and well, and we aren't anywhere near solar minimum as yet.
Solar Cycle 24 is alive and well, and we're not anywhere near solar minimum yet. And it says here at SPACEWEATHER.com, AR2733 is a member of a decaying solar cycle 24. So this is where I start to get confused right off the bat. Everything that I present, information-wise, says the exact opposite of what Mr. Strong says in the very beginning of his video. So already I have to question his intent. and his actual knowledge of the situation for him to say that we are alive and well in solar cycle 25. Let me show you something else. Here is the sunspot number progression, okay? We'll take a look, and this is the same exact information that Dr. Strong uses as well. Okay, this is where he pulls his sunspot numbers, but here's the number progression. Solar cycle 24 was one of the deepest minimums seen in 150 years. There are some reports that are saying that solar cycle 25 will be stronger than 24. Now, from what I've seen in these papers, what they're not telling you is that solar cycle 25 is not going to be stronger or enough to even notice. And you all know how this works. The sunspot theory, everything takes time. TSI, it's not an instant effect on our global climate. It's regional. But back to the point here. As you guys can see, the red here is predicted values for sunspots. Okay, so in other words, NOAA really thought we would be right around here at this point of 2019. And this is why so many of us are concerned in the community about the acceleration of this particular minimum and how fast it's reached the bottom, where even NOAA believes we should see plenty of daylight between the bottom of this chart and somewhere around the 20s. All right, but right off the bat, Mr. Strong says that solar cycle 24 is alive and well. Folks, you can see where this starts and ends. This thing is on life support right now. He does tell some truths as we go along, but I just want to point, this is fact number one. He does not believe we're in a minimum, period. But here we are sitting on the bottom, as predicted, late 2019 into 2020 would be the bottom of the minimum. The minimum has already begun. The solar minimum has begun. Okay? That's been proved by NASA, and an article that shocks the heck out of me on theweather.com, and that's more proof, and I'll bring that up too. I'll definitely show you guys that. So solar minimum is not a question right now. Okay? It's understood that we are in that period of our cycle where sunspots are at a minimum. Can you look at this chart from 2018 and beyond and tell us that we are seeing minimal activity from the sun when it comes to sunspots? Is there anything that resembles 2016 and 14 and 15? Heck, it starts declining in 14, really. But we still had some oddball peaks from 16. So clearly, I'm not sure if Mr. Strong actually has really any kind of background on this, when I'm just a guy who puts things in layman's terms, and I can make the connection. I can see it. We are at the bottom and almost peaked out at the very bottom, which again, a lot of folks said this solar minimum, solar cycle 25, starts around late 2019. The peak of this minimum looks like it's going to be around 2020, 2021. It's logic, guys. All right, let's listen on. 10 seconds in and I already had to stop it.
So what is the problem? The problem is sunspots, and far too many of them.
Far too many of them, folks. Remember that. Far too many of them. Here's our current situation, and Mr. Strong is claiming that there's way too many sunspots. This group right here. Which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost positive this image is from 2014 because I saw this as I was searching for charts before the show.
Shouldn't be getting this many sunspots if we're anywhere close to solar minimum. And a new set of sunspots emerged this last week in active region 2733. Here's a plot of the sunspot number over the last 13 years. And at the moment we are...
Okay, so the beginning of the video, he states that we're nowhere near minimum. He is showing the truth right here, folks. There's your proof. That looks like we're at the bottom of a slide right there. So he debunks himself 25 seconds later. He starts the video off by saying we're nowhere near minimum, and now he says here we are. And like I said, guys, this is common knowledge. Looking at this chart, you can clearly see where the peak and the lows are, and clearly we are at the very beginning of the low, and this will bottom out 2020, 2021. But this man here is saying we are nowhere near solar minimum. Okay, this is really too easy, guys. I kind of feel bad for doing this.
They're here, fairly close to solar minimum, but not there yet. This is a picture of the new region, active region 2733. And as you can see, there's quite a large number of spots there, including a...
Again, he wants to refer to this grouping as quite a large amount. Is this the biggest sunspot region we've had in a while? Absolutely. 26 was the number on it. But we've had way bigger than that on streaks where we hadn't seen a sunspot in 30 days or 15 to 20 days. And then we get big sunspots. They are typical in minimums to have an occasional big sunspot, but nothing over 26 or 30. Nothing.
A large leading spot. The sunspot number is officially up to 30 at the moment.
But he sees 45, so okay. I guess we'll take your word for it, fella.
But I can see at least 45 spots, so I suspect that number...
So the information is bad, is what you're saying. So heliover is giving us bad information, okay? Gotcha.
...will increase.
Oh, that's the part where he says this will increase. Watch this.
30 at the moment, but I can see at least 45 spots, so I suspect that number will increase.
Current sunspot number from 2733, 22. Wrong again, Keith. Wrong again. All right, let's continue.
The region just produced a C flare, which is the largest flare for quite some time. And that would make more C flares quite likely.
Oh yeah? How's that? Oh wait, he's going to explain right here, right?
Well, active region 2733...
Whoa, wait. You can't just come out and make a video and make a claim like this and not provide any proof.
The region just produced a C flare, which is the largest flare for quite some time. And that would make more C flares quite likely. Well, active region 2733 is definitely an old cycle region. How can we tell? The negative polarity...
So he jumps out of the whole solar flare thing. Forget about C-class flares. Let's talk about why we know this is part of the old cycle. Okay, tell us something we don't know. We understand this, the GSM community. We totally understand what you're doing right here. But I'm more interested in your claim about how this indicates that we're going to see more C-class flares. Because here's what I can remember off the top of my head. All right, we had a strong X-class flare in the September of 17. All right, which that was the flare that told scientists here recently, this is why we're not heading into a grand solar minimum right now, because if we were in a grand solar minimum, the sun would not be capable of producing any X-class flares, according to a group of scientists who believe that solar cycle 25 will be another cycle before the grand solar minimum starts. So that's first and foremost. Okay? We know this description of what a sunspot is and polarities and all that. So the X-class solar flare in September. And then it mentions on SPACEWEATHER.com, February of 18 was the last C-class flare that we had. And it's almost February, but we didn't see an X flare this year. We didn't see anything moderate. We saw some very minor, barely C-class flares this past year. So if anything, we're watching a declining scale. September of 17, X-class. Fast forward to February of 2018, and we had a C-class flare. Fast forward to January of 2019, and we had another C-class flare. But between the months of February and now, we haven't seen anything over a C-class. In other words, this year in the cycle, the sun was not capable of producing an X-class flare at this point, which again would point in the direction that we are declining in solar activity, getting closer to the grand solar minimum. If you believe, like we do here, that the cycle is going to have one more, and the 2030s is when the real grand... You can call it super grand solar minimum if you want, because I've seen the information and I believe it's going to be really bad based on the numbers that we have right now. And it continues to decline and get worse. Let's continue.
That's the black polarity here, is leading, and the positive polarity is following. That's the signature of a solar cycle 24 region in the northern hemisphere.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
So solar cycle 24 is still producing.
Anybody digging the music, by the way? I think it's funny he edits music into this, but he doesn't edit out his ums and mispronounced, which I do it all the time, but I do this live. I don't put music in the background to a live performance.
Large and strong spot groups. That is not a characteristic of solar minimum.
Oh.
Well, let's take a look at the movie of the flare.
This is the
region shown in the 131 angstrom band of the AIA instrument on the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Here comes the flare. Very pretty.
Very pretty. Okay. I really am having a hard time. This guy really has any background in solar anything. This was pretty when you first saw it, ever. When you see as many as we see, we know these are dangerous. These could be dangerous. And yet here is another misleading fact of information, guys. He's put the scale of Earth in a position to make it look like that this solar flare is heading towards Earth, okay? But in fact, this solar flare has already turned Earth facing and starting to head towards the western limb, which means it's going to brush, if there is any effect at all, it's going to brush I think the western part of our magnetic field. So it's not a direct hit. It's not an Earth facing situation. Believe you me, Ben Davidson would have already told us by now, for sure. Have you heard anything about Earth having problems from this solar flare, this very minor C-class solar flare? Okay, thank you, Mari, my producer. She's right all the time, so I always confer.
And that flare was a long duration event. It lasted a couple of hours, so therefore may well be associated with a coronal mass ejection. Now that's in the part of the sun that could eventually affect the Earth, so we may be looking out for some aurora in a few days' time.
Guys, you gotta get worried here. We got aurora coming. Again, thanks, Captain Obvious.
So why is all of this such bad news for the grand solar minimum crowd?
Okay, so he calls us a crowd, thank you, but then he has a title that says cult. Why is this bad news for GSM cult? Okay, I was not aware this was a cult. I did not realize that we had scheduled meetings where we all drank the brown Kool-Aid and took the pill every night. I'm not sure why we're being called a cult, but I don't look at it as cult. I look at this as the information highway. Means 24 is still alive and well. Okay, we debunked that already. It's not alive and well. It's decaying. In SPACEWEATHER.com, Dr. Tony Phillips's own words, this cycle is decaying, and I'm sure many scientists from NASA will agree with that statement. Solar minimum will not likely be until later this year or even next year. Okay, so later this year is close enough to where you can't use the words, we're not even close to a solar minimum yet. I've already showed my proof of the solar chart. Okay, we're in a minimum, point blank. 2008 was the last time we started a minimum. Nobody questioned that, as it went into 09 was the peak. 2010 is also at the bottom before it started to rise again late 2010 into 2011 when we were coming out of the minimum. We are nowhere near that right now. We are in a minimum. It's already been confirmed. So all the extreme weather events are not associated with the GSM. This is where people like this guy don't watch our channel. I've made this clear, and I'll do it again. I'll make it clear right now. The Grand Solar Minimum channel reports on weather across the world, floods, droughts, snow, cold, tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes. The reason why we report on these subjects is because in a grand solar minimum, these extreme weather events that we're seeing now, which is, by the way, this is the warm-up period right now. This is the appetizer, all right? Galactic cosmic rays are at a record number. Solar activity is plummeting. So if we have our history to look at and base what happened when sunspots were this low, we have only one thing to assume, and that is there's going to be some cooling associated with the grand solar minimum. Weather.com has already confirmed that because of where we are in solar minimum, it's going to be a cold January and February and even into March this year in 2019. Those are the words from weather.com. All right, now even though they have an article here about solar minimum, solar cycles, at the midpoint there's some garbage about how, it won't affect global warming, but I think they put that in there so they don't get, kicked out of their clique, because everything else is pretty much fact. So I guess what I'm curious about is, why is it that every time it snows or gets cold out, that these people think that we're glorifying grand solar minimum when all we're doing is bringing light to the extreme events? I'm not reporting on every 3 inches that falls in Dime Box, Iowa. I don't want to talk about a 2.5 earthquake in California. Okay, that's not what we do. We will mention stories of relevance to what you can expect in a grand solar minimum and a more frequent. Right, if you think getting 16 inches of snow in 1 week and having 2 weeks before the next system is grand solar minimum related, you're sadly mistaken. What happened in Austria is just a very tip of the iceberg of what could happen in certain regions during a deep grand solar minimum, which we are not in a grand solar minimum yet. We are in a solar minimum, and to me, so far, this one looks pretty deep as well. Very low. So again, I want to make our stance clear. We are not saying every night that when we report snow or volcano, we're not saying that we are in the grand solar, but these are events to familiarize with and prepare for, because it could get crazy and a lot more frequent. And there will be a time where we will be pushed to our limits and challenged as a society because of this event. People keep saying, well, our ancestors got through it in the 1600s, we'll do it again. Correct. However, are we going to be able to feed 7.2 billion people during this grand solar minimum when it wipes out villages bigger than what we had back in the 1600s? I'm not trying to fear it up, folks. I'm just speaking truth. To hear that statement, well, we got through it, we'll get through it. Yeah, we will. We'll find a way to adapt. I believe that. But I don't think everybody will. Sorry. I don't believe that. And if we're just in the very beginning of what could happen in the next 10 to 12 years as far as grand solar minimum, and we're working our way to that level, because I'll tell you something. Looking at the numbers. Oh, where'd it go? Here it is. I mean, when you look at the big picture here, the solar cycle's 23. Look at how much of a drop-off we have from 23 to 24. There is that slightly predicted in the red lines, by the way. The red line is the prediction of where solar cycle 25 before it plummets into 2031. That's where a lot of folks believe that we will see a grand solar minimum. It's not happening right now. Keith only told a little bit of truth, which was the C-class and the X-class flares, and that's true. That's the main reason why I agree that we're not in the grand solar minimum right now. We are going to bottom out in the next year or so, and we will see more cold. We will see more wild jet streams. We will see more extreme weather. We'll see more droughts. Okay, Alaska, that's not uncommon during these periods of time. Australia had a heat wave. That's going to happen. Okay? Nobody here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel is calling for an ice age during the Grand Solar Minimum. But what we are going to say is that sure is an awful lot of cycles that are syncing up right now that are concerning, that could also impact global temps. Not just what happens during Grand Solar Minimums, but other cycles, and we'll get into a lot more of that down the road. See if anything else meaningful or something worth talking about comes out of his mouth.
Well, first of all, it means that solar cycle 24 is still alive and well. 5. So all the extreme weather that they've been attributing to the effect of the grand solar minimum can't be associated with it because the grand solar minimum hasn't started yet. In fact, the solar minimum hasn't started yet.
See, that's so narrow-minded because the effects of solar minimum have begun. The cosmic ray. Look, we can go right back to SPACEWEATHER.com, guys, okay? They have a team that's monitoring cosmic rays. Of course, I can't find it right. Oh, here we go. Cosmic rays, and here we go. Here's the numbers. I mean, the proof is here. The effects are starting. We may not be in a grand solar minimum, but ever since December of 2014, we've been on the rise of cosmic radiation increase. I just invite this guy to actually look at the data, actually listen to what we're saying. We're showing the correlation between the cooling, and it's happening. And the mainstream is also recognizing, and I'll get to that here in a second.
I hate to kick somebody when they're down, yet we have more bad news. There's already signs of solar cycle 25.
And here's where I laugh, because this has nothing to do with our channel, because we're not claiming we're in a grand solar minimum. We know, or we have a decent idea when it's not starting now. It could be the 2040s. I know Mari, she is very careful. She doesn't latch on to one thing or the other. She just lets the information continue to flow. So I blame her to keep me grounded for the most part. But I think the 2031 target date for the grand solar minimum is pretty likely compared to what I've seen. So that's where I'm going with that. But this guy here doesn't think, he thinks everybody thinks the same. He thinks everybody's pushing fear porn and wants to scare people into thinking they got to prep. We do got to prep. We got to start getting our asses in gear when it comes to prepping and learning to grow and being sufficient on our own. But we still have some time.
The 3 ringed areas here are reverse polarity sunspot regions. And so consequently, that means that solar cycle 25 is beginning to appear.
Yep, we know.
Now that's very early.
No.
It could indicate that solar cycle 25 will be larger than solar cycle 24, which is the exact reverse of what the grand solar minimum people have been predicting.
The grand solar minimum people. Listen, what he's talking about, if we do see a larger solar cycle 25, the paper that I read to all of you, or the abstract I read, was talking about 134 sunspot progression, I think, which I think 24 was around the low 100s. So it's not that much. When you look at previous solar cycles, all right, when you look at previous solar cycles, look at 2003 and 2002 and 2001, over 200 sunspots progression. Look at this. 22. That's where the heat really started, remember? That's when we really started getting all that global warming crap. Comparing 73, the 60 to 73 time period, putting it with the early 2000s is quite, in my opinion, quite accurate. We saw lots of hot weather in the 50s and 60s. We also saw some cold winters too. But look at how deep these sunspots dropped here in the solar cycle 18 at the end, all the way down to 0, 43 all the way down to 0. That's why we saw such cold weather. 60s to 70s, not quite at the 0, but still low enough. And it looks like that we were starting to see these totals, sunspot lows, lifting off of the 0. But as we got back at the end of 23, we see them hitting the bottom once again, leading us to believe that solar cycle 25 is going to be more of the same. I think this is a little bit of premature prediction. But this video, this guy is not very versed about solar cycles, in my opinion. And I think it's horrible that he's even got 1,400 views.
So let's see if we can draw this together into some sort of conclusion. First of all, solar cycle 24 is still active.
Yeah, I know.
So we're not at solar minimum yet.
We are.
So none of the odd weather that we have been having can be attributed to the onset of a grand solar minimum or even the onset of solar minimum itself, because neither of them have happened yet. We're also seeing the first signs of solar cycle 25, which is unusually early and means that a grand solar minimum is very much less likely.
Well, for solar cycle 25, you're correct. Absolutely correct. There's the only truth that you told there. Was that if we are in a solar cycle 25 and it's going to be slightly stronger, GSM is unlikely, which we've been shown the evidence. We believe that too. But you're acting like as if, okay, everything's fine. These people are crazy. There's no GSM. There's no solar minimum effects. That's bull. Look at all the flooding. Tell that to all the people this year who've been flooded out of their homes, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. Tell that to people that saw rushing rivers coming down the villages' streets and wiping out everything they own. Tell that to people who have seen more tsunamis kill people than we've seen here lately. Increases of volcanic activity. Tell that to people who've died in cold weather that was brutally cold weather, like the cold snap that we're getting here soon. And again, I'm only mentioning these things because these are just examples of extreme weather conditions of a solar minimum and grand solar minimum. But they come at a more frequent rate and stronger. These are just strong events that we're experiencing now that you can grow to get used to in the future. Okay?
So if you hear somebody spouting on about a grand solar minimum, just tell them that they're full of nonsense and post a link to this video. Until next...
They're full of nonsense and post a link to this video. Because he knows it all, guys. And he gave so much proof about why there's more sea flares. My favorite is how he says, because we've got more sea flares coming likely. Well, where's the proof? If you're going to make claims like that, put the proof out. Not make some generic produced 4-minute video with silly music in the background, yet you won't edit out your misspeaking or your uhs, but you've got corny music, you put graphics together, you've repeated yourself about things that aren't true several times. This is a joke. This is worse than Paul Beckwith, honestly, because at least Paul thinks he understands weather, but he does understand forecast maps and all that stuff, but he's still pushing the AGW science. This guy looks like some person who's jealous about other people who have been right about what's happening with the sun. And so he's not getting any attention, and he wants to keep putting out videos like this. This is disinformation. This is fake news. Great. Are we still live? Check, check. I think so. I got the green. Are we still live? Cool. So anyway, for a good laugh, go ahead and watch the video on your own. I'm not even going to leave the link. You'll find it. Just type in Grand Solar Minimum Cult, and I'm sure it shows up #1. I'm not going to promote this guy any more than I have tonight, but I wanted to bring this to you people because this is part of the problem. This guy says we're not even in a minimum yet. Really? We're not in a minimum? And what in the hell is this if we're not in a minimum? Your sun in the middle, that is from 2016. Your sun on the very left, your left, yeah, my right, I don't know. A little bit more active, you can see. I don't have my arrow here, I apologize. The middle is 16, and the very end, if you're going left to right, is current. Now, 14, 16, which 16, by the way, folks, is coming out of a max. 14 is in the peak. That's what a sun looks like during a maximum period. The one on the very left, with all the sunspots in the southern hemisphere. That's what an active sun looks like. Hell, half the time, a lot of the times, not in this particular cycle, I don't believe, but a lot of the times you see sunspots both north and south above the equatorial region. That's how active the sun really can get. But I use this image because this was a fair amount of sunspots. This is what a lot of sunspots looks like, folks. On the left, that's a lot of sunspots. What we're looking at on the right, you be the judge. When you hear people say that 2733 is a lot of sunspots, that's why we're not in a grand solar minimum or even minimum. No, we're in a minimum. More visual evidence, more proof, lack of sunspots indicate we are in the minimum. And I don't understand why he can't see this. Based on predicted numbers from NOAA, we have accelerated to the bottom and continue to do so. Can't tell you how many times we've looked at this channel over and over on SPACEWEATHER.com, where it talks about a sunspot 13, 14 number, and it talks about how this is a typical solar minimum sunspot. Back in 2016, we saw a lot bigger sunspots when we started this channel. Sunspot number 22 is nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's not going to affect our planet. And shame on people like Mr. Strong who mislead with false info. And his answer is, hey, just, if they talk about GSM, send them a link to this video. Huh. Well, that'll close the book for sure. No. The one thing I really like about this is the people, for the most part, who are debating him are bringing up very good points. They're not calling him ad hominem names. They're not insulting his mother. They're giving him facts, even links to go look it up. If you look at total solar radiance, levels 23 was weaker than 22, and 24 was much weaker than 23. So MA Farmer GA is just pointing out the trends are there. We are on the decline, my friends. One guy here got a little obnoxious. The North Pole is wandering at unprecedented pace. The magnetosphere is also weakening faster than ever seen, and you're stuck on bleeping sunspots. LMAO. Exactly. I mean, without the cursing, whatever, it's an F word. We're adults here. But he's right. Everything else that happens during grand solar minimums that you read about in books like Upheaval, all right, it's happening now. The precursor. We're getting the appetizer. The main course is still a few years away, which is good for us. Bad for some of us, because some of us are actually feeling the effects regionally at this point. The comments are adorable. We have people from both sides in here. Forget this joke. He's using old data and trying to pass it off as current. I think this person is correct in this comment because, like I said, the sunspot chart that I picked up, I was searching, I saw the exact same sunspot that he was using in his video. Instead of actually going to HelioViewer and picking out the current image of these sunspots, which I just showed you guys here in our space weather report. Here, I'll zoom in. Oh, what happened? Sorry about that. Yeah, that's it. We've seen a lot bigger than that. Even when it pushed out that C-class flare, we've still seen a lot bigger than that. And our sun's quiet. And it's going to continue to be quiet. Indications that the backside of our sun right now is quiet. It shows right here. Maybe something on the far eastern limb of our sun, almost on the completely opposite side. But right now it's just an active region. And I think everything that's happening right now is right on cue. Solar cycle 25 is going to start when it's appropriately going to start in the next maybe 3 to 4 months. A lot of people said mid-19 to late 19 is when solar cycle 25 starts. We may be approaching that. This was just another example tonight, guys, of disinformation. And if you're in there, still disagreeing with me, then what do you say about articles like this? Weather.com. What are solar cycles? How do they affect us? This came out January 12, 2019. For over a billion years, the sun's light and heat have played a major role in influencing atmospheric and weather conditions on Earth. Today's meteorologists believe that solar cycle may also have some bearing on India's weather. To understand this further, we need to examine what drives the cyclic variation in the sun's energy, i.e. sunspots. Again, The Weather Channel does a great job of throwing together information about sunspots, and the correlation of lack of sunspots means cooler temperatures. I will point out that the sunspot theory is very informational, but it does mention that the work here shows that the next cycle is not going to be weaker, but in fact may be stronger. So even these people are saying it may be stronger, maybe not. There's no possibility that solar activity will die down in the near future and giving a rise to global cooling. In addition, if you ever consider hypothetically that the sunspots will go on decreasing, it's not enough to offset the current warming, as the base of the energy of the sun that we receive every day will remain constant. Oh, really? Oh, really? I accidentally... Oh, here it is. Really? Remain constant. So, show me, once this comes up, what's constant about what the sun's output is right now compared to a period where it was a little bit warmer according to the UAH. All right? This is constant decline and could continue to drop below these levels, which a lot of us are expecting. And right now it's indicating it's going to continue to drop. The TSS. So the output is actually declining. Again, I think that this Weather Channel article, this part of it was included so they don't get kicked out of their clique. Because this really talks about how solar cycles do affect temperature. They mention the moderate minimum in here. They also talk about how solar minimum affects communication systems. They're dependent on reflective signals from the upper atmosphere called the ionosphere. Scientists say that both sun and humans play a role in increasingly poor quality of radio communication in recent years. What I'm interested in here is it didn't mention anything about CO2, but possibly just overall air pollution that humans do cause. While greenhouse gases warm the Earth's atmosphere, they result in a cooling of the upper atmosphere. Okay. Again, this is the part of the article where it's like, okay, we got to throw this in here because we pretty much told everybody that solar cycles are going to be colder and this and that. It talks about polar vortex, how it affects not just cold bases, but also India. They're making correlations here. And like we've made the correlation between solar minimum and grand solar minimum, and how grand solar minimum is regional. That there will be places that are warm. There will be places that have droughts. There will be heat on the planet. Okay? Grand solar minimum is not the ice age. The ice age is its own entity. And there are a lot of suggestions out there that the cycles that we're heading towards right now in the next 10 to 50 years could put us in a new glaciation period. With the acceleration of the sun's declination of its activity, it's certainly positive, or possible, I should say. So, again, you can't debunk solar cycles. And you can't just put together a 4-minute video and say, well, that's it. There's no solar cycle because we got 26 sunspots in a grouping. That's it. Call off the channels. I guess we should all just shut it down then. Mr. Strong, he figured it out. Good job, guy. Good job. And I hope you can hear the sarcasm in my voice because it's pure sarcasm. But I think I've got my point across, guys. When you see videos that lack showing the proof, I showed you guys the proof. I'm also going to show you proof that we're not melting any ice caps anywhere. As we continue to go through 2019, we continue to grow in ice. Look at that. We're right at the edge line for 2012. Compared to where we were this time in 2018, look at that. Not even close. Look at the gap. I mean, yeah, 2018 was a terrible year. But 2019 appears to be the recovery year of the ice in the north. Like I said, this is going to take time. This is not going to be an instant change. Next year, I'll go ahead and put money down right now. We're going to be above that 2012 mark when it comes to sea ice in the Arctic next year at this time. I believe that's where we'll be, is near that 2012 line. Starting point. And moving forward, going up. Taking a look, nothing really changing, guys, on the outlook temperature-wise. We're going to get really cold this Thursday and Friday, Wednesday, starting Tuesday night, actually. We're really going to see this peak cold hit Wednesday. What we were talking about earlier on Sunday's show, pretty much sticking around. This cold air is going to hang out. We will see a February thaw. I'm confident now that I've seen the models that we will see a brief February thaw before colder air returns. Once again, we get 2 decent chances of a February thaw. One is right here, starting on the 4th of February. Temperatures for a lot of places in the Northeast just upper 30s. So basically, not warm, but still for this part of the area, warmer than what we've seen. Ohio 50s, Pennsylvania 50s, and further south we're starting to see 60s. So there's the first one, and then there's another brief one again that's trying to fight this colder air that's starting to make its way into the northern plains by February 6th. Another brief warm-up, and this one would be the warmest the Northeast will be for another few days, as another blast of Arctic air is making its way not only back in the U.S., but back into the same areas that just got through this current blast. This one looks to hang out for a few days like the one that we're currently experiencing now. The difference is that it's not going to be as strong and as deep as this one is right now, which is an indication, I hope I'm right about this, that we might just be experiencing this coming week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we might be experiencing the coldest air of 2019. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to stop getting cold, but it may not be as bad for the remainder of February and through March. So it'll still be cold, but hopefully we won't see the values that we're getting ready to see here in the next several days. That's all I'm saying. Again, nothing really changes here. The snowstorm we're expecting tomorrow in the Northeast is going to hit. They did lower the totals by about 3 to 5 inches. We thought maybe over a foot. Now we're looking at more likely about 6 to 10 inches in the Northeast and moving forward. Coastal areas will get some snow. And really just kind of those 2 February thaws that we were talking about, rain for the Northeast and the East. There's 2 snow systems that could have been really big snowmakers. Now, Wisconsin, northwestern Illinois, you guys got to keep an eye on. That could be a big one for you, as well as Michigan as well. But again, another rain event in the Northeast. So in 4 days, we see 2 decent-sized rain events here, dropping maybe another inch to 2 inches of rain in that region that just got done seeing around 2 to 3 inches of rain after this last storm that we got that was thought to be snow at first, but turned into an all-rain event. But after the 8th of February is when we start to see winter come back again, Clipper systems, and we got to watch this storm system here the weekend of Valentine's Day. This is a classic winter storm system starting here in the Midwest. The rain snow line, the freezing rain in front of it. The South, once again, you could be experiencing a lot of freezing rain. This is way far out, but this is the possibility, and occurring to a lot of trends so far. I say this is a likely scenario that the Midwest, the East, and the Deep South and the Northeast could also see a decent weather maker here by Valentine's Day, as another, looks like atmospheric river is approaching Southern California by Valentine's Day. So nothing really much changed on that. The El Nino temperatures rising just a bit above 5. So we are barely in the El Nino range, but very, very, very poor. North Atlantic is doing crazy things. Showed you the ice already. And that's really all I wanted to talk about tonight, guys. Here's a current look at temperatures across the United States. We are starting to see that. These are wind chills. So already starting to see those negative 20s in the northern plains. It's getting cold in Illinois and Indiana, as this will only continue to get worse over the next few days. But I hope you guys were able to gain something from tonight's video. And this just goes to show that there's just people out there who are bored and they're just making corny videos for YouTube purposes. This was not an informed video whatsoever. This was based on opinion. This man is biased. He believes in global warming. He believes that humans cause global warming. He believes that CO2 is the reason for the warming. But he ignores the data that shows that it's the other way around. So I don't know. I hope everyone got something from this video tonight, though. My main point to drive is that here's the grand solar minimum. We're not blaming every snowstorm on the grand solar minimum. We're trying to report on these large type events and tectonic events to make people aware and realize that these will become more frequent and stronger and more severe. Yes, I said it, more severe and stronger without heat. And that time will tell. And so far, since 2016, time's telling. Now, solar cycle 25 could be the unknown. Who knows? But right now, if you have to look at current data, you have to believe that we're in a solar minimum. You have to believe that these lower solar activity correlations are impacting the climate. And guess what? Or at least the temperatures anyway. Sunspots. All right? I think that's another thing that people don't understand. GSM it affects more temperature, and the cosmic rays that are entered in our planet right now is because of a weaker magnetosphere during these minimums. So that's another indication that we're in a minimum when you have increased cosmic rays, record-breaking cosmic rays. All right. So again, I just don't understand how people can deny even the solar minimum hasn't even started. It has started. We're not at peak of solar minimum, but we have started a solar minimum for sure. Mari, do you want to say hello or check in with me, tell me how everybody's been good tonight, I hope?
I could do that.
Nice behaved. Hopefully you didn't have too much trouble tonight.
Well, everyone's behaving themselves in the chat, and they're lovely, as usual. We have a great group of people, Jake. It's interesting to hear other people's feedback as you're talking about Dr. Strong, saying they're all very clearly in agreement with you.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
He is
absolutely not a clue.
The best name or description for him is Oaf.
Oaf.
So far that was the one. So winner for Edwin Rude. Good one.
Love Edwin.
Okay.
Good to see you tonight, bud. Oaf.
And just talking about prepping, you know, it's crazy that he is pigeonholing us into like this crazy cult. You know,
Any of us.
What exactly are we a cult for? I mean, basically what we talk about is earth changes and natural cycles and how to be best prepared for them. And personally, I think it's just better to be prepared for the worst, hope for the best, and that way you can go into the future fearlessly. I think it's really important for people to pass down lost traditions to their children, because the fact is, it might not be the grand solar minimum. It could be, you know, something with the power grid, or you could be affected by a hurricane or a tornado, or it could be anything. So equipping yourself with survival skills is important regardless of what you think may or may not happen. Laura Hughes is a new sub that is watching tonight, and they put teach your children well so they don't have to rely on anyone else. And I think that is not fear-mongering. It's not anything. That's what we believe in at the Grand Solar Minimum, and it's important. So if he wants to scoff at the GSM crowd for getting together and talking about facts
and before,
and
because I forgot once,
papers.
I don't mean to cut you off, but when you say cult, and what I think it is, that these people in the AGW are upset that, okay, like we have several thousand followers. Other channels have several thousand followers as well. 10s, 20, 30, 40,000, 60,000 followers. What is upsetting the AGW is that people are believing it, so they assume that we have cult-like mentality to get people to believe what we're saying here, and that's not it at all. These people that believe in grand solar minimum and what solar cycles do to our climate are people who are of age that have lived through this kind of stuff in the 60s and the 70s. They remember being taught about solar cycles and how they affect the climate, and they learned about the mini ice age. So to hear the word cult is another example of how he provides a claim or an opinion without backing it up. Just like when he said there was more sea flares coming. He didn't back that up. He isn't backing up why this is a cult.
Well, I mean, you can't debate properly with generalized statements and assumptions. Come on.
Yeah.
So, that's all I got, Jake.
Good job tonight. Thank you for helping me. You helped some of this information for me tonight, too, to make sure this show was done properly. But, guys, I really hate disinfo. And You know, you can disagree with what I'm saying all you want, but I'm going to point to the direction of where I've got the info. When I see baseless videos like this, poorly produced, horrible sound, terrible editing, and factless claims, I'm going to point it out because thankfully no one more than 1,400 people, he's got 8,000 subs and he hasn't had this thing viewed more than 1,400 times. So thank God people don't pay attention to this, but this could slip through the cracks. And, you know, we got enough fake news out there. We don't need any more. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight and joining us. Please like and share and subscribe to us. Make sure you hit that notification bell. And we will be back live Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, guys, we will talk soon. Be safe out there.